Video game storytelling isn't just at a point where it's on par with other mediums. It's so good and the medium is so uniquely interactive that I'd argue there are plenty of video game narratives that best those coming out of film, television, and books. Actually, I know that for a fact because getting this list down to just 10 entries was an absolute nightmare, but I trust you to get down in that comment section and fill out the ones I missed. I'll just take a second to point out this list includes 10 incredible stories that can be found in games, but it's far from an exhaustive list. I'm Jess from WhatCulture and here are 10 perfect stories told in video games. Number 10, FIREWATCH. Video games like Mass Effect have proven time and again that games can take these galaxy-wide epic confrontations and make incredible stories, but things don't have to be life or death for a narrative to be perfect. Developed by Campo Santo, a studio made up of ex-Telltale writers and phenomenal artist Ollie Moss, FIREWATCH tells the story of a fire lookout called Henry who spends a period of time in the Shoshone National Forest. The adventure and exploration-oriented gameplay in an immersive setting largely revolves around a mystery you encounter in the forest, and your ongoing conversations and relationship with your supervisor Delilah over walkie-talkie. The beauty of this game is in its simplicity and extraordinary writing. The few choices you are called on to make throughout the game increase your empathy for Henry and his emotional state and relationships he develops throughout the game. The game also has an intro that's on par with the movie Up and The Last of Us in terms of its ability to make you cry right out of the gate. The gameplay might not be for everybody, but the earnest and heartfelt story is worth experiencing for even the most devout anti-walking simulator players. FIREWATCH is a masterclass in nuanced writing that's able to take the mundane and make it really special. Even though you might not necessarily get the grand conclusion you are hoping for, there's so much joy in the journey. Number 9, The Last of Us. Since we brought it up, there's no way we're getting through a video about wonderful stories told in video games without mentioning The Last of Us, and I think if I tried, you guys would quite rightly tear me apart in the comments. From the very first moment, The Last of Us grabs you. Its world, its characters, its very unique apocalypse and how those within it have adapted. It's a really engrossing concept and it's executed so well. The emotions of the characters you embody and encounter are so authentically presented and delivered. The phenomenal performances, the story that winds through a fairly long period in time in a brutal game world but never outstays its welcome, and the characterization of its heroes is almost without comparison. These elements succeeding the way they do ensures that you feel Joel's desperation, his growing affection for Ellie, and every twinge of fear that death is just around the corner. Culminating in one of the most impactful endings that is as divisive as it is completely earned, The Last of Us is narratively flawless end to end. Number 8, Soma. Switching out one brutal post-apocalypse for another, that's about where the similarities stop between The Last of Us and Soma, the 2015 survival horror adventure from the developers behind Amnesia: The Dark Descent. If you didn't already pick this up playing Amnesia, frictional games really know how to tell a story. And to say that they tried some narratively and thematically challenging things with Soma would be an understatement. In short, a major extinction event has occurred on Earth in 2104, and what remains is the crew of Pathos 2, who were working in an underwater research facility. You explore the events that followed, learning what became of humans trying to grapple with their predicament, and figure out why you've awoken alone in this facility after nearly dying in a car accident in 2015. In a Delilah-like twist, you'll spend a lot of time talking with Catherine, a brain scan of a Pathos 2 worker housed inside a robot. To say much more would be to spoil the narrative, but suffice it to say, it really goes places. The story deals with themes like the human condition, artificial intelligence, what makes us who we are, and the muddy intersection between technology and humanity. It's not as scary as Amnesia in its moment-to-moment gameplay, though there are monsters here and there, but it doesn't need to be, as the implications of the narrative come chocked with enough psychological horror for at least a good handful of sleepless nights. Frictional absolutely nails the landing on this one too, as it's got a fabulous ending. If you haven't experienced it for yourself, make sure you go do that, and if you're a scaredy cat, not to worry, there's a safe mode, so the monsters can't kill you, so there's no excuse. Number 7, The Longest Journey. While there are games like The Last of Us that I couldn't get away with not including, I've tried to throw you some curveballs in this list that you might not have played, because AAA studios haven't cornered the market on perfect stories. For this entry, we're heading back to 1999 1999 when Funcom released the fantasy point-and-click adventure game and my favorite game of all time, The Longest Journey. A true high fantasy narrative with a firm grasp on telling the realistic story of an 18-year-old living in a future metropolis while incorporating the parallel world of magic that exists in tandem and the socio-political chaos unfolding across both worlds. There's a lot going on here. But whether the story is focused on protagonist April's relationship with her best friend or her fraught family life, or switching gears to helping various magical races reunite, the writing is sublime. Beyond that, the game boasts a suite of enigmatic and fascinating characters, bolstered by brilliant performances, and each of them feel unique and palpably realized, adding to the weight of the narrative. This is back when adventure games didn't let you make choices beyond proving you could solve puzzles and perhaps making a call as to whether you want to spend the night out with a douchey guy or with your mates. The Longest Journey has a meticulously designed story to tell you and wants you to experience it as intended. The Longest Journey is just that, a fantastic and unforgettable hero's journey that's just a joy to watch unfold. Number 6, Silent Hill 2. Diving back into the horror genre, we simply can't ignore one of the best stories ever told in Team Silent's 2001 epic Silent Hill 2. James Sunderland has received a curious letter from his late wife, which takes him to the sinister town of Silent Hill. The game has a huge amount of symbolism that reflects James's deep-seated insecurities, fears, and beliefs. There's an impressive amount of subtlety in the storytelling that elevates psychological horror beyond the simple presence of monsters in front of you. The monsters are actually a representation of James's disturbed psyche, and your journey toward learning that and realizing who he really is fascinating. Another cool area in which Silent Hill 2 is extra special is that you can get different endings depending on how you played. For example, if you spent a lot of time with low health, the game interprets that as James being suicidal. Silent Hill 2 deeply embeds you in the disturbing story that it has to tell in a way that only a video game can, and it's a story that's impeccably told. Number 5, Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt. I wrote a list last week rounding out 10 games that are indisputable masterpieces, and I didn't put The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt on it. And while 10 was really not enough for that list, I'm not gonna make the same mistake again and leave it out here. One of the clues that The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt story is really something special is that you don't even need to have played the previous games in the series to fall in love with it. It helps, for sure, but the game has already won plenty of fans just on its own merits. Another game that presents absolute high fantasy heaven, The Witcher 3 excels at world building. From its unique locations that each have their own social and political tribulations, to its cast of colorful characters. Everyone has their favorites, and the story is riddled with highs and lows. Expect to be laughing, crying, and everything in between, no matter how your particular version of events unfolds. End to end, and including the DLCs, you're hard-pressed finding writing this good from many other places in video games. Number 4, Persona 5 Royal. This one has to kick off with my traditional Persona 5 Royal caveat, which is I'm really sorry that the perfect version of this game exists in a different format to the 100 hours you might have already spent in the vanilla version, but it does. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with Persona 5. It's also a fantastic game, but when we're talking about perfect video game narratives, we can't leave out the impact that Royal's new storyline has on making this one flawless. This is largely due to newcomers Kasumi Yoshizawa and Takuto Maruki, who collectively introduce what I would argue as one of the most well-written antagonists and fascinating high-stakes fantasy stories in any medium. I really don't want to spoil any of the twists and turns that lie ahead for you here, so I'll just say the narrative progression, mature themes, and relationships are handled so expertly. The unfolding narrative and its implications is so deeply affecting, and while it's a story that's been explored before elsewhere, Persona does so with its trademark charm and unwavering earnestness that tugs at your heartstrings every step of the way. Number 3, Red Dead Redemption 2. I take personal offense when people tell me that Red Dead Redemption 2 is just too hard to get into because, look, yes, it does have a slow start, but my only reply is, okay, but you're missing out on one of the greatest stories ever told, in anything, ever. As with the case in almost all of the games I've mentioned, much of Red Dead 2's strength lies in its incredibly realized characters, especially Arthur Morgan, who might be my favorite fictional character to ever exist. Another theme present here that I've mentioned earlier in the list is that the story, writing, and characterization succeeds due to its subtlety. Arthur is relatively reserved. He doesn't want to be mixed up in the drama of the rest of the Van der Linde gang, and almost everything in the story just happens to or around him, and he's forced to deal with it. The fact that Red Dead Redemption is already a masterclass in video game writing, and that we just added gorgeous graphics and a new fantastic character, means Rockstar was set up for success from the beginning, and they continued to prove themselves. There's a deep pathos and empathy that you'll be feeling for Arthur throughout his journey, and it's something that makes it really hard for you to forget Red Dead 2's story anytime soon. Your deep connection with Arthur is what really winds you into every single plot point and NPC interaction. You'll be cheering through all the highs and absolutely feeling your heart break in the lows, and it's just fantastic. Number 2. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. A story so cleverly told and compelling from end to end that it's still up there with the biggest buzz in video game storytelling circles almost 20 years after its release. Knights of the Old Republic is something truly special. From its wildly memorable characters to its perfect pacing, playing through KOTOR and seeing the story at its heart unfold is absolutely delightful. While BioShock is equally remembered for its epic twist, KOTOR is so much more than an unexpected 180 in the plot. Your journey from scrappy nobody to a lightsaber-wielding hero and beyond is extremely satisfying, as is building up relationships with your confidants. Characters like Bastila and HK-47 will go down in history as some of the most creative and memorable ever realized in the medium, and the writing is consistently spot on. Whether you're light side or dark side, there's a very cool story to be unraveled here, and it's this narrative combined with the game's mechanics that makes this one of the best RPGs ever made. Number 1. What Remains of Edith Finch. Giant Sparrow's 2017 adventure What Remains of Edith Finch is a little bizarre and frequently takes hard left turns, but in the best possible way. The game tells the story of a family that meets various misfortunes, and you'll play through a series of their experiences to learn more about them and what happened to them. The gameplay style and mechanics shift frequently throughout, but it's all in the service of the overall narrative, which comes together seamlessly with interesting themes that ruminate on family and death. It's a little hard to talk too much about this one without spoiling it, but since you can knock the whole thing over in less than 3 hours, you're better off just playing it for yourself. Like many non-AAA games, What Remains of Edith Finch has that indie charm in that it's precisely what it intends to be. Nothing more and nothing less. Luckily, that just happens to be a really fascinating story told in a way that only a video game could get right, with some stunning sequences you won't be able to get out of your head. I will warn you that this game is kind of a giant bummer, but if that doesn't put you off, then this one's absolutely worth playing for yourself. That's it for my list, but make sure you let me know down in that comment box what would make your list for perfect stories told in video games. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you're liking, come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonnell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.